is Julia, and today I'm going to be kind of doing like a candle making tutorial and show you guys how I make my candles. Okay, so to start out, you're going to need a little metal pot like this that you can get basically any online candle making supply store. And then you're also going to need a metal stirring utensil. It doesn't really matter what it is as long as it's metal. I just picked this up in my kitchen and decided to use it, and it's just kind of what I've been using. I use these wax chips because they're pretty easy to use. This is the soy wax, and it is the one that helps with frosting. I also use this little booklet to kind of keep track of my recipes for each of my candles. I have quite a few different recipes, so it just helps me to not get them mixed up. So now what I'm doing is I'm preheating my oven to the lowest temperature because heating up your bottles helps with bubbles and frosting. Something about if you use cold containers, it causes bubbles. So this is one of the ways I found out that will help reduce bubbles. Now I am taking a pot and filling it with about 1 inch of water. You do want to use a pot that you don't mind getting ruined. It will kind of have like scent residue, so you don't want to cook in it after you use it because you will taste the scents from the candles. Now I'm going to put the wax into my little metal pot, and basically the way that I measure this out is if I'm doing a 4-ounce candle, I will take a 4-ounce container and I will do 2 scoops of wax, and that pretty much makes it exactly to where I need it to be, and I don't waste any wax or not have enough wax. It's just the perfect amount of wax. And obviously I do that with the 8-ounce container if I'm making an 8-ounce candle, and that's kind of what that looks like. And here's what the comparison looks like between the 4-ounce containers and the 8-ounce containers. So now I am turning the heat up on the stove to about, I think I usually do high. You want your water to boil pretty well, and that's going to help your wax melt. I use the colored dye chips. There are different kinds of dye that you can use. There's a liquid form and there's block that you can actually break chips off, but I found this is the easiest way to kind of measure out the colors. And I'm going to be making a pink candle, so I'm going to be using a red dye chip, and I'm just going to be breaking off a little piece because the wax is a white wax. So when I just use just a little bit of the red, it makes a nice pink color. That way I don't have to buy a ton of different colors. It kind of saves me money because I don't use pink all that much, but I use red a ton, and that just helps. And I also mix colors like red and blue obviously to get purple, so it just makes it a little easier not having to buy a ton of different colors. So now you just kind of want to let your wax melt, obviously, until the chips are all the way melted and you have more of a liquid. One of the ways that I've found that is my point to finding out when my wax is all the way heated up to where it needs to be is once the dye chip is all the way melted. The dye chip takes longer to melt, so that is kind of like my determining factor of when my wax is done. Also, the color that it is in the pot isn't what it's going to actually look like when it is dried. It dries a lot lighter than what it looks like in the pot. So while that continues to melt, I'm going to put the wick into the candle. I use the pre-tab wicks that look like this, and I just hot glue gun them in. There are little stickers that you can get so you're not actually putting like hot glue into your candle, but I just prefer this way because it just seems to work better for me. Now, sometimes I take the jars out a little before I do this because you want your jar to cool just a little bit, enough to where whenever you use the hot glue gun, it's gonna not keep your glue wet. And if your jar's too hot, then it will take a long time to dry. So I generally will take it out a little sooner and then let it cool just a tiny bit and then put it in, because then it won't take as long to harden. I also use clothespins. They have actual things that you can attach to the wicks, but they're a little more expensive, and I found that clothespins work just as good. So I use the clothespin, and as tight as I can and as close as I can, I put it on the jar, and then I bend the tab back. So this is what it kind of looks like once it is all the way melted. All the wax flakes are melted and the dye chip is melted as well. So then I'm going to take it off the heat and I'm going to put the scent in. I use this little syringe which came with one of my kids' medicines. It is a teaspoon syringe, and I generally do 2.5 mLs of each scent for a total of 1 teaspoon of scent in a 4-ounce candle. For the 8-ounce candles, I do, if I'm doing like 1 scent, then I'll do 2 teaspoons of that 1 scent, or I'll divide it up between the different scents that I'm using. For this candle, I used 2 different scents, so I just did 2.5 mLs of each scent. And then stir it up really good. You want to make sure that it's evenly distributed throughout the wax so that you don't have like some parts of the candle that smell really good and some parts that don't smell. So then I'm going to pour the wax into the container. You want to make sure that you pour the wax at a pretty even speed to reduce bubbles. You don't want to pour it too fast, but you don't want to pour it too slow either. I placed my finger right here because it helps me kind of control that speed as I'm pouring it. And I generally don't go over the lip of the container because it kind of concaves a little if you do that one when it's drying. Also, you want to make sure that you are letting your candles dry in a place where they're not going to get bumped, because if they get bumped or moved at all, they're going to have bubbles, which is going to cause holes in the top of your candles when they dry. Also, you want to make sure that between each candle you are rinsing out your container. I always wash it completely out with soap so that it's not mixing the scents or causing my scent to kind of cross-contaminate, and I scrub it with a sponge too, just to make sure that it's all the way washed out. Using hot water is the easiest when working with soy wax, so I put it on the highest temperature that I can. And you want to make sure that it is completely dry before you start another candle, because that's another thing. If you have water in your container when you're melting wax, it will cause bubbles again. This is all stuff that I learned just from experience. Nobody told me these things. It's just things that I figured out as I was learning. So this is what the candle looks like when it is finished and dry. And I did go ahead and cut the wick on this. So that is basically how you make candles. It is fairly easy. It's just a little time consuming when you have a lot of candles to do. But yeah, that is really the process of doing it. It's not totally complicated. It's pretty easy, and you just have to have the right supplies. And I do think that investing in good products is going to make your candles better. And also I did want to mention too that with soy candles you will get a little bit of frosting, and that's normal, and it just is something that happens with soy wax, but it's not really that big of a deal. So if it happens, don't worry about it. The best thing you can do is keep them in like a controlled environment when they're like setting. Like, you don't want them to get too cold or they start to frost. So you can, what I do is I put them in a box in my cabinet, and it kind of keeps them warm because I have my air conditioning running all the time when it's summertime. I don't really have that problem in the wintertime, but in the summertime I do, and if I just put them in a box in my cabinet, they tend to not frost as much. So that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial on how to make candles, and if you did, please like and subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!